This podcast is part of the How We Are network. For information on this episode and many other like-minded shows, visit howweare.org. That's HOWWEARE.org.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast, your weekly dose of independent culture. And this week, there's a lot of stuff happening this week, so I'm just going to get right to it. Adam Elmakias, and I'm butchering his last name, I think Elmakias, I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. He is a professional photographer, a young one at that. He is the ripe age of 25, and I thought he was a little bit older when I reached out to him. Yeah, and I was just pleasantly surprised. I was like, oh, that's good. You're young. You're hustling. Hustling is an understatement. The dude is all over the place. He's traveling with bands, taking live shots, taking promo shots. He's putting cool visual stuff out there in the world, and that's kind of what attracted me to speak with him in the first place. Let me tell you, this is a journey. We talk about a lot of stuff. Adam, definitely, there were certain points where I felt like we might have taken a break, like take a breather, but Adam kept diving in, and I was so glad he did, and I was able to have a really, really nice and sometimes very deep conversation and fret with depression. I was trying to think of a better way of putting that, but no, we just talk about depression, and he suffered a lot from that and still battles with it occasionally. So we dive deep into that. But anyways, let's get some business stuff out of the way, and then we will dive into my talk with Adam. And if you're not subscribed to the show, please do so, because every Wednesday I post a new show with what I define as someone who is doing stuff that is cool within the context of independent music. So the best feedback that I get is like, hey, I subscribe to the show. Every week I check out the guest. Even though I may not either like their band or like what they do, there's something that is a through line through all of these stories, and people are generally the same, and not in a bad way, but we've all kind of had our sort of ups and downs, and it just humanizes. Like, anyways. So subscribe to the show. That's all I'm trying to say. Follow along in this awesome journey. 2 notes of business. 1, go do a survey. And I know a survey, it's like, holy shit, that sounds incredibly boring. But if you like the medium of podcasting, go to www.podsurvey.com/words. Basically what that is, it's like a 5-minute little survey that just gets some demographic information. It's nothing personal. It's not going to ask you if you've had some crazy diseases. It's basically like, hey, do you like tech? Do you like video games? All that sort of stuff. Because basically podcasting is still such a new medium. People don't really know who's listening to this. And this is the way that you are going to help the show by doing the survey. So like I said, go to www.podsurvey.com/words. And if they pick you, you win a $100 gift card. It's a winner at random, and your email address will not go into any other weird sort of like cold emails that you'll get from, hey, check this thing out. No, none of that will happen. You'll complete the survey, and if you win, they'll contact you and be like, hey, here's $100. So thank you for that. For those of you that have been listening to the show over the course of this month, May, I've been doing a fundraising campaign, and this show is free for you. And I appreciate those of you who are contributing to this fundraising campaign. I can't thank you enough. It's awesome to see the sort of feedback, and people that have been previous guests on the show are tweeting about it and talking about it in their social networks. Like it's humbling to have that thrown at you, because I mean, people, even though this is just kind of like a simple interview, a lot of people that participate in this, as far as like the guests that I have on, remember this interview. They think about it after it's over. They're like, oh, wow, that was a really cool interview. I really enjoyed that. I had a fun time with that. And I don't think that happens with a lot of interviews that these people do, because, you know, after all, a lot of these questions get kind of boring. And I don't know, I just pride myself on the fact that people that are guests on here enjoy that. So anyways, because of all that, I just want to figure out a way to make the show better. And that's why I'm coming to you, the listener, to make that happen. Visit a website, please. This is the last week that I will be bugging you to do this. Basically, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a year, I'll do this. Please go here. It's patreon.com/, the letter X, purpose X, which is PURPOSEX. And you can go there. It's kind of like a Kickstarter, but basically the idea is that if you decide to contribute a certain amount a month for the show, you will get cool stuff. You will get stickers, you'll get buttons, you'll get a bonus episode, you'll get a chance for me to potentially interview you for a upcoming episode, a lot of stuff. Let me put it this way. So this show gets anywhere between 10 to 25,000 people downloading that. And it blows my mind that we reach those sort of numbers. It's crazy. It's amazing because even if a small portion of you, like no joke, if 20 of you decided to give like $10 a piece, you would be covering the show for so many people. I would be able to get better recording equipment. I can maybe travel to do some interviews, to meet up with people face to face that might not do interviews on a regular basis and might not ever want to do anything over the phone or Skype or whatever. So anyways, I'm coming to you hat in hand to be like, hey, give some money. I really, really, really need it for the show. Okay? Thank you very much. Anyways, business is out of the way. So Adam came over to my house. We hung out. We talked. Like I said, it gets deep. It gets real. It gets awesome. There's so many highs and lows. And it was cool because I always like when I feel the energy from the person and we start to kind of like bounce off of one another. And I felt like towards the end of the conversation, it was definitely like, man, we are in a really good mental headspace where the conversations we were having were it was just as real can be. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Adam, and I will talk to you afterwards. But usually I start these things off with just my own personal kind of like entry point to you and your the work that you do, where like, because clearly photography is a very crowded market. Like, I mean, in 2014, even in 2010, like even before everyone had cameras in their pocket, it was one of those things where it's like certain photographers just, they just have like a certain either distinct look or vibe or what they're trying to capture. And you definitely have that, but it was the way in which you marketed yourself, for lack of a better term, where you like put yourself out there. It really impressed me in regards to like, oh, okay. I mean, like you essentially market yourself like a band.
Yeah.
And like in certain respects, I'm sure people get put off by that. Like just like looking at you.
I was trying to explain to somebody yesterday. Keep going.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, I'm excited to hear your perspective, but it's like it for me. It initially like it feels uncomfortable for a minute, but then I look at it and I'm like, oh well. It makes sense for what you were trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
But so it sounds like you went into it. That was a deliberate thing that you were doing, right?
Yeah.
So do people have that sort of like, what baggage do people bring to that?
In regards to like if somebody first looks at my site and doesn't know anything about me,
right?
Like, well, I expect the response to be, what the fuck?
Who's this dude? Right.
Why does he love himself so much?
Sure.
Why does he have to wear a shirt with his own face on it? Why, what entitled him to do this? And I totally get that.
Right.
And I'm okay with that.
Okay,
that's fine. Like if then you're probably not my target market.
Right.
And most people who come to my site to look at my photography, hopefully they get the photography first and they understand me a little bit before they stumble upon my merch.
Sure. Because
it does have my face on it and it is myself, but that's my brand. So I'm going to support it and I'm going to back it and I'm going to wear it and do my thing. I mean, that's something I created. I'm proud of that.
Right.
But and if I ever get off track here, feel free to read.
No, dude.
I'll like start talking and then forget the questions.
That's the whole point.
Okay, cool. So but I mean, it's a combination of that. I'd say somebody looking to hire me.
Yeah.
Comes, likes the work, might not understand that. Somebody looking to look at my work that's maybe more of a fan would probably buy into the merch as well and be like, oh, I get that. That's cool if they follow me online.
Right.
Somebody who has no idea about anything is going to be totally confused.
Right.
Where like maybe like my life is totally on the internet. Like I use the internet all the time.
Right.
So if you're not up to date on the internet, you're going to be so confused on why there's a tweet on a shirt,
I personally never had that sort of like gut reaction in regards to like, oh, like this guy seems kind of douchey. Like, like chill out, calm down. You're just a photographer. Calm down.
Yeah.
I didn't have that reaction. Like I said, I did have that reaction in regards to like you're consistent about it.
Yeah.
Like it's one thing if someone is like it's like they're like a chameleon, where it's like you can see the evolution, and that, I mean, that happens naturally within a person, but it's like, I guess the better word is like, you seem authentic in the way that you present yourself.
No, and I totally know what you mean, and I'm happy it came across that way, because the last thing I want to say about the last one is photographers come on, and I think sometimes people relate it to themselves and say, why can't I do this? Or think like that's the last thing I think people come and look and say.
Right.
And that's when people start hating on you, is when they're like, well, I like that you saw that, because, yeah, I feel that some people see what they want to do and then they become that.
Right.
Rather than just being themselves,
right,
and letting it kind of grow naturally. The more you do it, the better, more it grows. And you shouldn't, if it's going correctly, you shouldn't even notice. It should always just feel like people come to me and they're like, oh, you've done a great job doing this and this, and I'm like, there are some conscious decisions made, but at the same time, it's all been so gradual that there's never a point where I'm like, I'm gonna do this and not trying to be something, which is a good feeling.
Sure.
It's comfortable, I guess.
Yeah, well, you're kind of seeing where it takes you, as opposed to, I mean, honestly, I equate it back to, in my opinion, bands that have the concept of like the sort of step-by-step progress. Like where it's like, okay, we want to, put out a demo. We want to put out, our first EP, our first 7-inch. Like when you have those like incremental goals set, that forces you to have, a natural evolution and kind of follow that along, as opposed to, bands that fall apart and become completely transparent as far as like, oh, like you started with a business plan. Like you started with this like, all right, we want to get a 5-record deal from this label, like, dude, you haven't even played your first show.
Yeah, it's like kind of like a project.
Right, yeah.
Some people take it as a project, and
right.
some people just do it because that's all they know.
Right.
And they know it's going to work out. They don't know how it's going to work out, but they're taking whatever comes tomorrow. They're not figuring out what they want next year and trying to get there.
Right,
They're just taking it small steps and just growing and going with it. And
right.
There's no way to fail if you can't fail in that aspect, because you're not being like, well, I need to get this or I'm fucked. Like,
right.
All you're doing is doing tomorrow, and
right.
You can't be mad at that. Like,
no.
there's no way to fail.
Totally. And on that same token too, where it's like the something that's been in my head recently a lot in regards to like, success and like obviously how people measure it and stuff. It's like it almost literally does not matter, because like you look at whatever, it's like you look at, if you equate it back to bands, where it's like whatever, you can look at, a band like Coldplay, where it's like, do they right? I mean, they're massive, but it's like, I'm sure in their own heads there are things that they want that they can't, like they for whatever reason can't get. Yeah. But then like obviously you look at other bands that maybe sound similar to them, and they're like, oh man, we just want to be like Coldplay. Like that's where we want to go. Yeah. But no one's happy. Like once you
gotta be happy with what you have, and then have. But that's what keeps those bands going too, is the fact that they're happy, but they're not quite satisfied, and that's what keeps them.
That's true.
That drive is never going to be quenched, and people. It always bums me out when I talk to someone and they're like, oh, I'll be happy when. And they have like this thing they want to do. I'm like, first of all, that's probably never going to happen.
Right.
Second of all, you're never going to be happy if your happy revolves around getting somewhere, because that's not your happiness. That's like your thirst.
Right.
To do something.
Sure.
So like, you're not going to ever get there, because as soon as you get it, you're going to be like, fuck, I want to do this.
yeah, exactly.
I'm sure you know.
Because then, whatever, it's you reach that sort of like weird pinnacle, and then how long did people actually take that moment to appreciate, like, wow, that was cool? It's like maybe 30 seconds, and then they're like, all right, what's the next thing? Like, what's the next thing I can see? Yeah.
Like sometimes I'll be like, man, I really want to work with this artist.
Right.
And then I'll finally get it, and before I've even done the shoot, I'm okay with not doing the shoot and moving on to the next thing, because in my head I've already gotten there.
You've processed it.
Yeah. Like, oh yeah, cool. I got that client. Now let's move on. I'm like, you still got to do this shit, dude.
Right.
Like,
wait, hold on. I have to actually deliver the stuff that we talked about doing. And so you yourself, you were born and raised in, like, was it Madison, right? In Wisconsin? I've never been to Madison. I mean, total college town, right?
Yes.
Right. Yes.
It's video. Yeah. I'm like nodding, like yes.
Yeah, yes. Because that University of Wisconsin is there, right? What was your experience in the town? Because obviously there's a very large conception of the Midwest.
Tell me about it, because I sort of know, but
I mean, the impressions that people get, like, especially if they're born on the coasts and, like, really only spend the time on their coasts, is that, like, for one, it's, like, devoid of art. I mean, with the exception of, like, you'd be like, oh, it's Chicago. And it's like, there's obviously little markers in which you can point to, but a lot of people are just like, well, okay, you're less educated, like, and granted, these are very large stereotypes, but yeah, you're kind of culturally devoid. You don't really know, like, where to go, and you immediately want to go to one of the coasts because that's where everything's happening, and that's sort of like that restlessness that exists within kind of that the Midwest in general. So I mean, did you have that kind of within you as far as the
I mean, growing up there, you don't know that stuff.
Right.
I don't know those stereotypes about me.
Yeah.
The only stereotype that I've really learned that people think about in the Midwest is that they're all really nice. Like, everybody goes, like, oh, you're from Wisconsin.
Right.
Oh, and then they say, like, Wisconsin, like, all weird. And I'm like, nobody talks like that.
Right.
But, excuse me.
Yeah.
Other than that, like, growing up there, a lot of the things that I realized about Wisconsin, I didn't realize about Wisconsin until I moved to California. Like, I didn't realize... You
didn't have the basis of comparison.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I knew.
Right.
So, or until I went on tour the first time. You know, that was, like, a big eye-opener. But living in Wisconsin, especially Madison, like, I don't know, a lot of parties.
Yeah.
Like, my high school life was almost college life because me, myself, I didn't party that hard, quote-unquote. But,
right.
You know, if we, like, our Halloweens were spent, we have, like, the craziest Halloween. Like, it's, like, tens of thousands of people storming one street, like, riot police every year.
Sure.
Now it's more of like a actual thing they do.
Okay, yeah.
But
it's an organized event.
It's an organized event.
They
can't afford it. Like, it would be like horseback fires like every year. It was crazy. But that's what we did in high school. Like, people always try to tell me they party hard, and I'm like, I went to high school in Wisconsin, with next to a college. Like, you're like stadium. The football stadium is like 4 blocks from my high school.
Right.
Like they're. Like, I'm impressed with your partying, but trust me, I've seen, like...
I've seen some crazy
people
stuff.
Who drink always. Like, that's all they do.
Yeah.
Well into their career.
Right.
So, and nothing's changed now, but...
Right.
But still, like, growing up in that, like...
Did it, like, in a certain way, did it... I wouldn't say force you to grow up a little, but, like, did you... Because you were exposed to these elements that obviously, like, parents and society tries to shield kids from, and you were just like, well, there's literally no choice because I'm seeing it, like...
Yeah. The thing about Madison is that Madison actually is super diverse, super artsy, super, like, it's kind of like if you've been to Seattle or Portland, similar to Austin, Texas.
Sure.
It's like those places where it's not really like the areas around it. I can't speak for anything outside of Madison or Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, right.
Yeah, those areas fit a lot of your stereotypes. I have stereotypes about those areas.
Right.
But growing up in Madison was awesome. The only thing is, like, I still have friends who live there, and I just wish that the people I grew up with would take, like, either after high school or even after college now, most of them went to college, like, take 6 months and just travel.
Yeah.
Or just go to the rest of the U.S.
Sure.
Because... I don't feel like they're stuck. I feel like they are stuck, but not really. Like, they're not stuck in their heads. You know, they're doing their life. They're doing great. They're doing what they do best. And it works for them. But if they were to travel, I feel like they would see how much cool shit you can do.
Right.
And how much better life can be. Not saying it's bad. I'm just saying there's so much to do.
Right.
And that's why I'm happy I got out of medicine.
Yeah.
Because there's so much more.
Sure. Yeah. Once you expose yourself, you definitely have a different... I mean, maybe it changes your philosophy on things. Maybe it just changes your perspective, and then you're able to kind of be like, oh, like... even if you ended up returning to Madison, you'd be like, oh, I've seen all this other stuff, and I love Madison.
Yeah,
like,
I posted on my Facebook last night. I was like, it doesn't matter where I go. I never get more excited. I'm going back in like 2 weeks. I'm going to South America tomorrow.
Right.
And I'm more stoked to go back to Madison in like 2 weeks because all my friends are there, and it's just always a good time. Like, there for 3 days was the best time ever.
Yeah. And so what was your family structure like? Like mom, dad, brothers, and sisters?
I have a mom. I have one of each.
Okay.
And mom,
dad, so yeah, family of 5.
Yeah, family of 5. My sister is 7 years older than me. My brother's 2 years younger than me.
Okay, the middle child.
Yeah, and
what'd your parents do for a living?
Dad is a construction worker / construction engineer.
Okay.
Owned a construction company. My mom was an artist. Then she opened a store. Then she just kind of did a bunch of stuff.
Sure.
Now she works at a shoe store. She works in shoe stores for like the past 10 years.
Oh, okay.
My dad's from Israel, culturally very different.
Yes.
He moved here when he was 20.
Okay.
Married my mom when he was 20-something, 22, right or 25. I don't know.
Somewhere around there.
Somewhere around there.
Early 20s, right?
Yeah. And then we moved to Wisconsin. I was actually born in California. We moved to Wisconsin when I was like 2 or 1.
Why did what precipitated the move back to?
Down went to engineering school in Madison, Wisconsin.
Got it.
UW. Family life is kind of a little sketchy.
Sure. Okay.
Growing up was a little bit. I always talk about my high school life and my middle school life, and that's because I personally was like a very depressed human being then.
Uh-huh.
And my dad was very rough on me. Not saying he was a bad father by any means.
Sure.
Just culturally, the way they teach people in Israel and what you learn here is very different. You know, in Israel, after school, you go to the army.
You go to the army, right?
You grow up right away.
Yep.
You know, you're grown up.
You've got a gun in your hand. Yeah, totally.
You're ready for the real world. So it's, you know, he was a lot more strict and a lot more harsh by our standards.
Sure.
And then in 7th grade, they got divorced. And my life from like 7th grade to senior in high school is like, I've learned the most then, but it was like the roughest time of my whole life.
So you basically, did your parents split custody and you kind of like went back and forth?
Yeah, so what happened was their divorce was not
amicable.
Easy. Yeah, it was a very difficult time,
Sure.
like kind of sketchy.
Okay.
Like
was there some infidelity in there?
Yeah, it's like, you know, things like I don't know what my daddy wants to talk about.
Yeah. No, yeah. You can protect that the code of silence from that perspective.
Yeah, but you know, just seeing your parents in positions you're not used to seeing them in.
Yeah.
You know, they're perfect people in your eyes, and to see them upset and to see them lawyers, police, things like that is a very weird thing to see at that time in your life.
Well, you're not supposed to.
Yeah, you're not. And I'm like 7th grade. You know?
Right.
And so my parents split up. My mom moves a mile away from my dad. So all through middle school and high school, one person could punish me, I go to the other house. One person could want to do something with me.
You could play one against each other, sure.
One against the other. They haven't talked and still haven't talked since then, with the exception of one time out of court.
Right.
And so they have no relationship. And that was just rough on us because...
That's rough, yeah.
They would like, you know, they're still mad at each other. Me and my brother are the middle people. My sister has moved out almost by now.
Yeah.
And...
Well, yeah, those feelings, like, especially if they're, you know, if the legal system is involved... And not so much from just like a simple court decision, but like you're saying, like your parents don't have a relationship. Like my parents were divorced when I was about 4 because my dad cheated on my mom, and it was one of those things where both of them were fighting for custody over me. My mom won, and it was one of those things. I always reflect on the time where it's like I love my dad passed away a few years ago, and I love him, but it was one of those things where it's like my life would have been so different if he raised me, you know, but. Because I was so young, I don't have those memories of like what you had was like that sort of, you know, forceful, like, why am I sitting in this court? This is weird. Why are you telling me to go over here?
Yeah, it's weird, man.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
No, that fucks you up.
Yeah, it was really like it went
how old were you when you were experiencing all that? So like 7th grade?
7th and 8th grade were kind of when they were getting divorced. 6th grade.
Dude, you were like more than aware of everything.
Yeah, aware but also confused. And the worst part is like people at school know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I remember this one time, I just thought of this. I haven't thought about this instance in like years.
Yeah.
But I remember this one time I came to school with like a scratch on my face.
Okay.
And this is when it occurred to me that people at school know your personal life when big stuff happens. Like,
of course.
You know,
when it like makes the news, so to speak.
So like, and I only live 2 blocks from my school, so I could go. That's another story. But I came to school with a scratch on my face. And who knows what my mom was telling them, my dad was telling them, but they thought that my dad had abused me.
Sure.
They didn't tell me that, but I could tell. They're like, what happened to your face?
Yeah.
It was like a scratch. I was like, oh, my dad was picking me up in the snow and like flipped over and scraped my face, which is really what happened.
Right.
He'd talk. He was a strong dude, so he could like flip us over, and the snow was rough on top.
Sure.
And rough snow is ice.
Yeah.
So it scraped my face.
Right.
Whatever.
Right. You're like, that's my story.
I like ended up in like a counselor's office. They're being like, so what happened with your dad? Like they thought that my parents were like abusing me.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I just remember
and that's definitely that kind of plays into the sort of like small townness of the Midwest, where it's like
true.
People do know each other's business, and like not even so much from like a nosy perspective, but it's like, you know, people like there's just that sense. There's a sense of community, even in a large town like Madison, that is like is very difficult to replicate in other areas. Like, you know, whatever, you look at Los Angeles, and it's like 95% of the time people don't even know their neighbors.
Yeah.
But now you have everybody.
Dude, my family. Like, I always try to ask my parents about stuff because, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but my parents, like, we were the crazy family on the block. For sure. Like,
sure.
My
there was
dad
always loud noises. Right.
Oh, yeah. Like, like me and my brother always hung out together. We had a bunch of kids who hang out on the block.
Yeah.
I'd get sent home. He could still hang out because I was bad or I was too sassy to my friends' parents.
Right.
And I'm like, all this, like, we would cause problems. We'd like,
Sure.
like, we were that family that everybody.
Yeah. They always had.
They always knew about it. What we were doing.
Right.
What Elmakias is doing.
Right. They were like, well, maybe we just have to keep a watchful eye on what they have going on there. And so so as you started to, like you said, you know, fell into a depression just because of the horrible shit that was happening at home. Like, I mean, anybody would have gone to that spot. What was, you know, as you were kind of battling through it and started figuring out like what to do with that, you know, what did you start to, what kid were you like in high school? You know, were you trying to play sports? What were you trying to do to distract yourself?
I was depressed, man.
Okay.
Like, depression plays a huge role. Like, I am, like, the kids that are fans of the bands I work with.
Right.
That was me when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, leaving 8th grade, I had long hair. Like, depression was something I had prior to the divorce, too. It was, like, a diagnosed thing.
Okay.
And to get an idea of my parents' outlook, my dad doesn't do medication.
I was
my mom wanted to medicate me for everything.
Okay.
By the time I was out of high school, I'd been through, like, 12 different meds, starting when I was in 4th grade.
Wow.
So I had, like, ADHD, depression, anxiety, all these, you know, one thing to pump me up, another thing to put me down. It was, like,
right.
kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And so that combined with getting older, changing, divorce, meds in and out of the body, forgetting my meds.
Yeah.
You know, like, all this stuff just fucked me.
Of course.
So 9th and 10th grade are, like, the first half of my high school year. I was seen before it was seen. I was like emo kid, I guess you call it back then.
Yeah.
Swoopy
haircut?
Yeah,
sure.
swoopy haircut, long hair, baggy pants.
Okay.
Jinko jeans.
Sure.
Chains. I was making my own jewelry, hemp necklaces.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Like,
It's that sounds like a total hodgepodge of culture as well, where it's like you have a little bit of Madison, you have a little bit what you see on the internet, like.
It was before, like, it was right when MySpace was starting. It was when I was in high school, you know, 2003, 4.
Okay.
Facebook picked up by the time I was graduating.
Sure.
And so at that time, and there wasn't a lot of that in my high school. My high school was very diverse.
Okay.
So everybody, all different types of races, everything. Like, we weren't sheltered in that aspect, but there weren't, you know, I was the first one to wear, second one to wear skinny jeans, you know, first, things like that.
Sure.
But my sophomore and
was music playing a part of your life at that point?
It started, like, one thing I always had was a girlfriend.
Okay.
I always had a girlfriend. Don't know the psychology,
but yeah.
behind that, but I did.
So were you the type of guy that like went from relationship to relationship because you were like, I need that? Like,
yeah, I need a girlfriend.
Okay.
I thought it was cool.
Right. Yeah.
And like
it is.
Yeah. So I did. I really always wanted to be cool.
Okay.
But like music started playing a role in 7th and 8th grade. System of a Down, Linkin Park.
Oh sure.
And by the time I was 9th and 10th grade, I dated a girl who got me into like Thrice. Never really got into Blink-182, but like Thrice, Thursday, Take It Back Sunday,
sure,
Brand New, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Was huge. Music was huge for me. Eminem.
Okay.
Eminem was like the biggest.
Oh yeah.
And so I listened to my CD player all the time. Like got depressed, run away, listen to music.
Right. Retreated into that. Okay.
So I was like super in my own zone, but I wasn't like unpopular at school.
Mm-hmm.
I like knew everybody, but wasn't friends with anybody except for my like 3 friends. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Nobody hated me.
You could mix it up with everybody. You could go to the jocks. You could go to whatever. Right. But
people make fun of me. It don't matter. But
right.
Yeah,
but they're like, oh yeah, Adam's a funny guy. Like he's kind of the
So everybody always thought I was stoned. That's another thing. Okay. I didn't even smoke weed until like late years of high school. But everybody, because I didn't sleep at night because I would stay up late gaming or doing whatever, and I would get like 2 hours of sleep.
Okay.
And I'd go to school like bags under my eyes.
Sure. And so they're like, it must be stoned.
Yeah, everybody thought I was stoned all the time. Never smoked though.
Gaming. So you were into the online gaming?
Yeah.
What were you playing?
StarCraft and not WoW, Warcraft, the original Warcraft.
Okay, right.
I never got into WoW.
Which that makes sense in regards to the retreating, or you could use that and distract yourself from obviously everything going around. It's like, I can control this universe.
Yeah.
Because this other stuff I can't control.
Yes, that's a good way to look at it, and that's like that was like more like I separated into 2 things. That was like the first half of high school,
right?
Before I understood the world a little bit better, and then it's like sophomore. I did really bad in school. I didn't do very well. I didn't even go to class really.
Right.
Just hung out with my girlfriend.
Right.
I failed gym And
Did you not suit up?
I didn't go.
Okay, that
I just went to lunch.
Yeah, yeah.
There's like 3 lunches, so I went hung out with my girlfriend's lunch.
Sure.
And but I had like a GPA of like 1.4.
Ugh, yeah.
And then it was kind of cool because they're like, my dad was like, you can get a piercing if you get a 4.0. And you better bet next, like my dad saying that to me was him saying, you're never going to get a 4.0.
Of course, yeah.
I got 4.0 in like first semester of junior year. And that
you're like, that worked.
Yeah.
But that didn't work for my dad.
And I got that 4.0, and I also got an award for like greatest GPA improvement.
Yeah, well, that's a huge swing.
Yeah, so they're like, so they gave me like money and stuff. I was like, this wasn't like I intentionally took easy classes, got a 4.0.
Right.
And was awarded. This is awesome.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that leaves me at like sophomore year. I don't know.
Sure. And so as music started to play a part in like you, because
Yes.
I know in interviews that you've mentioned before, where it's like you started the the local show promoters like the Steve and Tom that you've mentioned in other interviews. Those are their names, right?
Yeah. Damn. You did research.
I poked around.
I came into this interview like I don't really like to know too much about people.
Yeah.
Before I meet them because.
Yeah, it's a natural exchange. I mean, I feel like honestly, you and maybe about like 6 or 7 other people I've done. I wouldn't even say research. It was basically I look at what I define as more comprehensive interview, and I'm like, okay, here's what I don't want to hit because it's already been explained.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I guess you have to do research. That's part of your job. But I almost feel bad because you know so much about me.
Oh, it's fine.
And I know you came like very highly recommended. Like my assistant does all the research, and she's like,
sure,
you have to go meet this guy.
Wow.
He has done some awesome interviews, and I was
That's
like,
great.
I'm excited.
She's
smarter than me.
Right. That's perfect.
Yeah.
I'm glad that she speaks highly of me, and
after this, I'm gonna go learn about you.
Well, great, spectacular. This is the starting of our relationship. So
yes,
it's perfect. So because I do like the notion of you saying that's like what I really identified about your story in regards to like. When you started taking pictures and the local show promoters just started being like, oh yeah, like you can show up and we'll let you in for free. Yeah. And it was like, that was literally I started playing in bands when I was like 15.
Okay.
And so I kind of had access to a lot of these venues already because they'd be like, oh, it's that kid that played last week or whatever. But I definitely took photos for my junior and senior year for yearbook for the only reason of getting my film developed for free. I would take whatever, the football team photos, and then I would be like, oh, I got some show shots.
On here, right?
Yeah, can you develop these?
Yeah.
And that was like the only,
that's awesome.
Hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of developing that I totally billed to my school. And it was like, I just so identified with you from that perspective.
That's cool.
You were doing the yearbook photography as well, right?
Yeah, I did some yearbook stuff, and my yearbook program wasn't the greatest, but it allowed me access to computers, a camera,
right,
and that's actually what got started me on photography. Like I didn't even know I liked it before yearbook class. We didn't have photography class, and we're also digital, so a little different.
Yeah.
That's definitely what got me into it.
Yeah, just the simple, and it's so funny because it's like the usually yearbook is from a photography standpoint is like could not be more boring.
Yeah,
like it is literally the most uncreative, uninspiring environment. In regards to like, oh, just take a picture of these people.
But you learn how to arrange people.
It's true.
Yeah.
There's and it's like if you can get excited about photography via yearbook, like that says something.
Yeah.
Because usually people do it and they're just like, oh fuck that, I'm not ever touching a camera again. Like that was awful.
Yeah.
But so for you to find enough value in it to be like, oh, I want to do this some more. So what like when you started going to shows and like started to have that experience of seeing bands live. Why did it ever occur to you to try to like start a band, play in a band, like have that sort of?
I'm so bad at that. Like again, it goes back to like that. The girlfriends I had like played such a big role in my life too because I hung out with them so much. Like I'm such an obsessive person. So one of the girls I hung out with played guitar. She's probably like the coolest girl I ever met.
Yeah.
And she played guitar and like introduced me to all these bands and like, but I tried, but I was like, I like fat fingers, and like,
right, like, I can't do
one of those mindsets when you're younger, like everybody else started when they're like 8. I'm never gonna be catch up.
Yeah,
I'm so mad at myself for having that mindset in my life.
Yeah.
That's why I never started. So, but I did like bands, and I.
But was there a desire? You were like, I would love to play in a band, but I can't do that because they started much earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, like they look cool, so I like tried to look like them. Like everybody does.
Of course.
And so, but I could get very close to them by taking photos of them.
Right.
And I learned that pretty quickly and even interact with them, which was super. I always want to be cool. Like that is a big thing for me. I love to be cool. So
And that goes back to our earlier conversations of like, when does that quest ever end?
Yeah.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. It's just like, yeah, I just like to feel. I mean, everybody wants to feel cool, but when I was a kid, like I always thought of myself as a loser. So I love the attention of being cool, like having friends.
Well, I think there's obviously different variations of cool.
Yeah.
What I always said is that the moment that you felt cool in the sense of like you're acknowledging it yourself, where it's like I'm cool. That's when it starts to tip over into the like, oh, you might not be that like that's when the ego takes over and you're just like, oh, I'm fucking cool. And it's chill out. You're not. But to that point is that you may be cool to this, whatever. If you're sectioning off like independent music. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, like by all definitions of the term, a person would look at you and be like, "Oh, Adam seems cool. He's involved in cool stuff." Yeah. So it's like that's a whole different.
It's kind of like I just want people to like respect.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe like cool. I did want when I was younger. Like I remember in 8th grade bringing like my dad would buy these big packs of gum from like Sam's Club.
Oh yeah.
And I would just snag one and I would go to school like with all the kids hanging out before school and be like, "Hey, who wants gum?" And I'd like give them to everybody. So I was like, I'm like trying to be friends with everybody.
You're like the gum peddler.
Yeah.
Hey, Adam's got gum. Let's go over there.
Yeah. I was like,
amazing.
that's cool. But I don't. You know. But now it's more so like respect. I guess is the actual thing that I wanted.
Yeah. No, that's the. I mean that. Yeah, maybe just a more adult way of putting cool. Yeah. Like you were saying, the closeness of obviously capturing moments and doing the live photography. Did you still feel a disparity in regards to like here's those guys on the stage and then here's like me? Like there was a barrier between you two, or did that make you feel a little bit closer? Because there always is that conception of like, oh, there's band dudes, like man, they're fucking untouchable. Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird because it started out with such. Even the small bands I thought were big bands. When you're younger, like 800 Caps sold out. Like Chiodos, I remember in high school, like I thought they were the fucking biggest band in the world.
Oh, they're huge. Yeah.
Now you realize 800 Cap is like.
Yeah, it's a good job.
Yeah, right. He's done well.
Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to talk down anybody. Don't get me wrong. That's more than 99% of the bands in the world can play to.
Of course.
But in the grand scheme of things, it's not a livable. It's not a living wage.
Right. It's not Staples Center in LA. Right,
yeah. So. Going to these shows though, like I shot at a venue called The Journey, The Loft.
The Loft, yes, I definitely remember. I never went there, but I remember that venue being a space. Yeah.
And then the Miramar in Milwaukee and the Rave and all these venues, and it was a progression. I started at the 10 to 20 people, up to 100, and as the promoters would get bigger shows, I would get bigger shows.
Right.
And when I say promoters, like I'm talking like a 20-year-old dude and a 17-year-old guy.
Oh yeah.
Like the kids who book these shows were young.
Yeah, you use the word promoter very lightly.
Yeah, they're just friends. Right. We're just like, yeah, man, come. Like
they're just organizers. They're just the guy that's who you talk to.
The guy who's like okay to lose a bunch of money and somehow figure it out. Yeah.
You'll have to go to an ATM at the end of the night. Yeah. Did you feel like that sense of community when you first started showing up at these things and be like, oh wow, like there's
It was earned for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, like when I first started showing up, I didn't really have many friends.
Sure.
And there was a few kids in my school that would go to the shows also.
Okay.
And I became friends with them, and I don't even really remember, man. I went to the shows first, and I couldn't afford to go to all of them.
Sure.
Then I started bringing my camera and shooting, and it wasn't like I'm going to be a photographer. I just started shooting.
Sure.
And then I started putting the photos on my Smug Mug, and then
Smug Mug. I have never heard that.
You know what Smug Mug is?
No.
Oh, it's like a photo. It's a photo site that mostly like wedding photographers use.
Okay.
And
does it still exist now?
Yeah, I use it still.
Oh wow.
And it's not like it's like a back end kind of. So like they sell the photos, but you can also make your portfolio site on there.
Ah, okay.
But when I was younger, nobody used it, and it was really small.
Sure.
So I used it to like put like every show I shot, I put on there, and I still have all the photos on there. So.
Well, that's cool.
I think I had my eighth birthday with them this year. So
nice. That's cool.
But yeah, no, I put them all in there, and I would send them out to everybody, and they would put them on MySpace, and then I would put my tag on it, and then it started just taking off. And
sure, people saw it, like, because there definitely is, especially it's like if your stuff is even like remotely good, because live photography is so hard. Like, it's like next to impossible to like make a living out of just live photography.
It's hard, man.
And so
but it's also the easiest photography to do.
Right.
Because you just show up.
You show up, right. It's all there for you.
It doesn't matter if you're good or bad. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you show up and be the best photographer ever, but you can show up and get shots that are perfectly applicable for every publication out there.
Right.
Like, you don't need to do anything.
Right.
And then the bigger the shows get, the easier your job gets.
Yeah.
As much as music photographers like to think that like I do think they get harder to shoot, but it's how hard you make it. Like if you're in the pit for first three every day for your whole life, your shots are going to be the same as every other photographer's, I think.
Of course. No, well, it's true because
you're dealt the same cards.
Right, there's only so many angles that you can shoot out from underneath the band. Yeah. I think that's also, I mean, in my opinion, what sets a lot of your stuff apart too is because you, like, there is such an intention in you creating relationships with the bands that you obviously shoot, and it's like, I know it seems like such a like obvious thing, like, oh yeah, of course, photographer, like, of course they get to know the band they shoot before they shoot them, or like as they're shooting them or whatever, but like it seems like you've deliberately been like no, we're gonna be I'm gonna know you, and like, I mean, that's like, obviously it's like all the work that you've done with Day to Remember. It's like there's nothing that, like, you know, you by all stretch of the imagination is like, you know, you can be considered just like an appendage of them, where it's like, oh yeah, it's Adam, like, he's shooting photos, like they don't even recognize you anymore because you're just a part of their
no, that's cool. That's cool you said that.
And like, I mean, that was your intention going into it, I presume, to be like, I mean, not like
I didn't know that was an option when I started. You know?
Right. No, but I mean, like, as you started kind of developing these relationships, was it like, oh, I'm capturing like cool moments because I have this like either access or this trust with these people? Yeah. Like, so as you started to kind of feel that, was that something that you, like, kind of, you know, wanted to make you do more of that? It
wasn't until, I would say, the past 3 years.
Okay.
So first time, I would say, like, I toured with bands for a few years, and then the first time I went to Europe with A Day to Remember was, like, probably one of the first times where I was like, whoa, like, these guys, actually, no, it wasn't even then. Yeah. Like, when I toured with bands at first, I didn't even take photos of them everyday life. Okay. I just was out there to try to figure out where we could shoot our next press photo. Okay. Which seems kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, you were just scouting, right?
That's what I knew. Right. That's how I knew to do photo shoots, because I went from doing tons of live photos to doing just photo shoots. Because when I started, I didn't have like a connection with photography. It was just to be cool, as stupid as it sounds. Yeah. So, and when I started doing press photos, it was to make money.
Of course.
Because I was young and I liked it, but I wasn't like emotionally connected to it.
Of course.
And when people would talk about that, I would tell them, it's like, I am not passionate about photography. I like it,
right?
But there's no way I'm like, oh, I need to do this. Like, I feel this shot.
It's like a fun medium to work in, but it wasn't like artistically inspiring.
Exactly. So it wasn't until like 3 years ago when I started touring full time where like, and even up till now and recently with The Day to Remember, it's been hard for me because I work with these bands. It's still a working relationship. Right. It's been hard for me to get over the work relationship and actually be their friend because so many people fuck you over. Sure. And to do that, it's like I can connect with the band so much better, and I'm like, dude, I'll like feel like crying like over photos. Like I like get into it. Like I am so stoked when I get good moments. Like they mean a lot to me.
Of course.
And it means even more to me that the band wants me there. Like to have that desire for the band to want to work with me is like, that's like the biggest accomplishment ever, and I would never throw that away, and that's why.
Yeah, well, because it's a whole different ball game. Yeah. Than inviting you out to be like, oh cool, every time we go through Madison, we'll invite Adam out and he can shoot. But like, it's a whole different thing to be like, hey, so you're gonna come with us for like a month on tour. Yeah. Like that's huge. That's for them to not only invest their time, but financial resources in you as well to be like, hey, what you're gonna get out of this. Or I mean, not only you, but what we're going to get out of this as a band is going to be beneficial as well.
Yeah, and it's cool to let me into their lives, and I have to remind myself how fortunate I am to have people that trust me like that. Yeah. And to me, I have no desire to shoot artists who don't want to have a relationship. Okay. If Metallica was like, hey man, come shoot us for a day, I wouldn't be like, no, I'm okay. But
you're like, only if we can be best friends afterwards.
Yeah, yeah. But at the same time, like, if a band asks me to come tour with them for a month, and I don't know them, which I have had happen, I'll turn them down very easily because I'm not looking for a monetary hire on. Like, I'm not looking to be expendable. Like, I'm looking for a relationship. Sure. So if you, like, money comes second to any of my decisions. So if you want me on tour with you, I'm looking for something, like, long term. Sure. Which is like, I sound like I'm dating somebody right now.
Well, no, but I mean, yeah, you're just.
But that's where I get the good photos, is when I've been with somebody forever. Right. And it's hard now because touring's time consuming, and I can't tour with everybody I want to. Right. I have to turn down a lot of work. Sure. But I'm trying my best.
And it's also interesting too, because it's like you've really in the same fashion as a band does, like, you know, when you were having to make that decision to be like, all right, I'm forgoing just working crappy jobs, and I'm going to dedicate myself to this. That's the same decision that a band has.
Yeah.
when they're like, all right, I guess we're going to tour full time. We're going to quit college. We're going to do whatever in order to try to make this successful. Was when you had to make that decision, was it pretty fraught with peril in your own head? And then like, how did your parents react to just be like, oh, cool, you're gonna take cute shots of bands, Adam. That's exciting.
Oh man, this is gonna be the longest answer ever because I kind of had to paint a picture.
Feel
free to interrupt.
Whatever. Oh no, it's fine.
But I guess it happened graduated high school.
Sure.
So last year's of high school, kind of learned tons of stuff about photography. Was working for publications by the time I graduated. Mm-hmm. Went to college, free ride for a semester, local tech college because I had scholarships and things like that. So I was like, all right, I'll try it out.
Right.
Wasn't my thing. Was working day jobs, and then January of 2008.
Okay.
I was getting confused on this timeline.
It's okay.
Yeah, January of 2008, I went on my first tour, which is fresh out of college.
Okay.
And that was when I wasn't making a lot of money.
Was when you go on tour with bands, I'm sure the structure still is roughly the same. Were they just paying you basically a per diem, where it's hey, here, Adam, we'll give you whatever, $20 a day to come hang out with us and shoot.
The first time I got paid to go on tour was in 2009.
Okay.
That was all-time low for their DVD tour.
Okay.
And they paid me $1,000 for a week and a half.
Okay.
And that's
pretty good. I mean,
the thing about photographers is to go on tour with a band, you are being compared to crew.
Of course you are. Yeah.
If I were to work regular photographer work, $1,000 is what I should be making in half a day. Okay. If that. You know what I mean?
Okay,
making, if you're shooting a commercial job, you're making tens of thousands in the week. If you're shooting, smaller promo shoots, you're making, a couple of grand a day.
Sure.
So to do touring stuff, your time is being not as a photographer, you're as a crew member.
That's true.
Which is different. So to come to terms with touring and getting paid was kind of a thing I wasn't ever ready to do because it is a huge pay cut. So I didn't accept money for touring until a day to remember hired me on full time this year.
Okay.
To be their dude.
Okay.
So and up till then I have never been paid to go on tour other than that one tour.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so you would basically just be okay, I need to line up my finances to where it's okay, I'm able to sustain myself over this time.
Yeah, it was just more valuable for me to be on tour, have nobody have any control over me. I'm on the road with a band, but I'm shooting what I want to shoot because they haven't paid me to be here. Pay for my own travel.
Interesting.
So I could peace out, come whenever I went. Nobody was really in charge.
Yeah.
And it kind of
gave you autonomy, right?
Yeah, I was in charge, and they were, quote unquote, not to sound conceited, but lucky to have me on the road with them.
Of course.
And I was doing my thing
because you were providing a service for free.
Yeah, right. And so I would get paid more,
right, just
by selling my photos to publications, labels, management, band to use for things than to charge the weekly rate because $700. That's less than a photo shoot. That is. You can make that, that's what crew people make $700 to $4,000.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because the only reason I ask that is because I'm always curious about the way that bands. I mean, I've worked at labels a lot of my life, and I've always had a relationship with photographers in regards to I will pay you this, whatever. I'll give you, $1,500 for this photo shoot. Yeah. But I've never hired anybody to work on a tour, and so I'm just always curious how that works. Yeah. But that's cool. I like that. I like your attitude going into it, where it's okay, I'm still able to. Yeah, the assets I capture will ultimately be larger than what it is I'm trying to get from the band, so to speak.
Yeah. Then that's the thing is money's not the factor there. It's I was paying for my own flights, my own travel, scheduling. That summer I did a 2-month run, but it was my own run. It's 5 different tours, work tour, kind of just going around, and that's more fun.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about.
Right. You're I'm hopping on here. How about, you guys are in Boise. I'm going to be there tomorrow.
I'll hit them up, fly in, and they'll pick me up. It's...
Right.
I don't know. They're not... It's fun.
Right. No, that's cool. I mean,
you're meeting tons of people.
Yeah. And that's... So, when... Going back to the original question in regards to, when you made that decision to quit and try to pursue photography from a full-time perspective... how did you, like you were saying, how did your parents react when you were, you were going to community college on a scholarship?
Yeah, so I went to community college, toured at the beginning of that year, and then that year I was in Madison doing shoots, touring once in a while.
Okay.
And then end of 2008, I had a huge depression thing.
Okay.
That kind of changed my life. So I ended up, I don't know if I've really touched on this much, but I ended up girlfriend stuff again.
Okay.
So I left on a tour, cheated on a girlfriend, came back, she left me, was with another dude instantly, broke my heart.
Sure.
For 2 months, I was like in my basement for
Sure.
2 months. Just didn't do anything because
Right.
I have like depression. I know how to handle it.
Well, and you also, I mean, and it sounds like I'm playing armchair psychiatrist here, but the concept of when a person always having a girlfriend, I can identify that. I always did that.
I know it's not healthy. I understand that that's me saying I can't do this on my own.
Right, or your identity is fulfilled within the context of this other person.
Yeah, not myself.
Right.
Which is something I'm good on now.
Right.
But it took me.
You had to learn. Right.
Yeah, so that happened, and I ended up in the hospital. Ultimately, I was in the hospital for like a week, and then I ended up in like a psych ward.
Okay, yeah.
Like
you had a breakdown. Right.
Yeah, I went like fucking crazy.
Sure. Right.
And that's when I was like, man, when I got out of the psych ward, like,
did your parent, like, were your parents finally like, we've had enough, like, Adam needs professional help, we need to take, like,
okay,
who recognized that in you?
Well, it had been an ongoing thing. I was living with my mom mostly. My dad lived
Okay.
pretty far away from Madison at this time.
Sure.
So I was in the basement for 2 months, and
I mean, it's pretty obvious if you're just
yeah. And this is not eating. I don't know how detailed you want to get into this, but not eating really.
Sure.
Like very depressed.
Right.
And I say I can relate to the kids that follow this music because like.
You were
I
there.
don't know if, I was cutting. I don't know if that's like something people talk about, but when I was younger, that was a thing that I did.
Totally.
And it was to a point where like every day I was like,
you didn't want to.
My mom was like crying. You know,
Sure.
like it was fucked up. Like I was.
I'm sure it's like. I'm sure she felt helpless because she couldn't help you.
Yeah.
You couldn't help yourself.
Yeah.
Besides the physical manifestation of you cutting, like it was just a cycle of no one could help you.
Yeah, and so like I said, like my parents only met up once since they broke up, and that was it was like last resort.
Right.
They both came over and trying to talk to me, and we're talking like I didn't talk to anybody.
Sure.
So it didn't help. And then one day my mom was like, Adam, you have to go to the hospital.
Right.
You're gonna kill yourself. Like it's like I was depressed, but I wasn't like out of commission.
Sure.
So there had been one time where I took a bunch of pills. I had to go do something at the hospital.
Sure.
So then I went back and I self-submitted myself to like acute whatever.
Sure.
And then I was there. I didn't realize what that meant at the time.
Right.
But it basically threw me into this now you're in the system.
Yeah, you are.
And once you're in the system, it's like that's the last thing my dad wanted. And that's the only thing last year that my mom had.
Right.
And once you're in the system, it's like so broken.
Of course.
It's fucked. So I ended up there and they couldn't support me there. So I got moved to like a psych ward, where you're with
like
like
straight
prison,
jackets.
like
Sure,
straight,
sure.
like yeah, you're in like prison basically, like on suicide watch.
Right.
With people who don't even know who they are.
Sure.
Like it was.
Yeah,
it was
different levels of crate. Like you were conscious of,
just suicidal.
Right.
So that's the only place I could go. And like I got out of there a week later, I got out of there on probation, so I had to like be off everything for 6 months, be on medication. And that's when I was like, I gotta do something different with my life, man.
Sure.
So that led into 2009.
Okay.
Which ultimately, I made a DVD after that. Was healthier, was on my medication. Didn't have any incidents, and like 6 months later, I was gonna go visit my sister in San Diego.
Okay.
And I had a falling out with a girl who I was talking to. To a point where I was like, I don't even think if she knows it was a falling out because I was so anxious. It made me like couldn't even handle it.
Right.
So I just moved on a whim to San Diego, like 2 days. 2 days notice was like I'm moving.
You're just like I'm out.
And that's when everything started getting better.
Okay. And so your sister lives in San Diego currently?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that was basically like, okay, I have some support system here. I need to get the hell out of Madison.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was like, dude, it's like the winters are rough. You can't shoot in the winters.
Yeah.
I needed like a new friend. I just needed to start over a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, you press the reset button.
Yeah, so...
Which is completely understandable with what you went through.
And I knew Pierce Avail there, so they were very helpful.
Got it. Yeah, and making you feel settled.
So that got intense. I was like, oh,
no,
actually
dude.
good. This is a good time to talk about this. I never got to talk about this.
Yeah, that is exactly what this forum is.
Okay, cool.
I mean, at that point, that you felt like you could obviously not even reinvent yourself, but legitimately start over and be like, okay,
what do I want to do?
Yeah, I'm going to I'm going to pursue this. I'm going to pursue photography.
That was when that was when photography started.
Okay.
For more, I started being professional.
Right. What was the first gig that you felt I guess gave you a sense of legitimacy in your own head where it was like, oh wow, I feel like that respect that we were talking about?
Well, I guess we skipped a little bit. When I was in Madison, I had a manager for a little bit who was like a band manager. He was a manager.
Sure.
Still is. But he didn't know how to manage photographers. But he brought me on and taught me the business side of things. Without him, I wouldn't have learned anything.
Right.
And so
he sent an invoice, right?
Yeah, he sent me email. He taught me emails. He taught me the business side of stuff that people don't know even exists.
Right.
Did a lot of photo shoots with hundreds of different bands just to meet them.
Got it.
And so by the time I moved to San Diego, I could do all that on my own.
Got it. Yeah. You could be self-sufficient, sure.
Yeah. So.
When did you feel like I guess you kind of turned a corner where it was like, okay, I feel like this did work. I feel like this reset button moved to San Diego.
I did a shoot in Chicago.
Okay.
Before I left for Ace Enders. That was one of his clients.
Sure.
And Ace Enders, early November, is you listen to him when you're younger. I was like, dude, shit.
Yeah, here's Ace, man.
Yeah, it was Ace. And I did it at the venue and after the show. And that's when I was like,
okay,
this is sick.
Yeah, you're like,
yeah, I was
like, I feel good about this.
Yeah, and then I started shooting all these signed bands, like Forever Sickest Kids or All That Remains or The Maine, Mayday Parade, Pierce the Veil, not Pierce the Veil yet, but just all these bands that just start shooting with me. Mm-hmm. And that was when I was like, this is cool. And then I moved to San Diego, and that's when I started my real first personal relationship with Pierce the Veil.
Sure.
So I did a shoot at their place, I went to their house, started getting actually, I don't know, that's when I started actually form a relationship, I feel like.
Right. When you started to, what you're doing now, where it's obviously you started to develop your own, brand, so to speak, where it was you were in control of it, you were doing it all yourself, you were making mistakes, and you were making all of this on your own, as opposed to...
I was broke.
Sure.
I lived with some dudes off Craigslist. That ended poorly. Right. lived with my sisters on my sister's floor for a little bit.
Sure. But you're like, I can't do that for that long.
I was it took a year or two in San Diego for me to really grow up. Mm-hmm. To mature, live on my own.
Sure.
And that took a lot. That was hard to balance too because I was gone.
Right.
So it was just it's a lot of learning in those first 2 years before I got stable here.
Sure. Well, you had to figure out so many different things. You had to figure out your own business. You had to figure out how to exist on your own.
Yeah.
Right.
Medicine, eventually, it's so much stuff.
So like you were mentioning at the beginning of this year, you now essentially are a part of the Day to Remember camp, and you travel with them. Do you basically do every tour with them that they go out with?
Yeah, we have a deal basically. So they are my first come first serve. I was apprehensive to do it at first. But it's not something I've ever done before.
Of course.
So I was I just gotta try it.
It is unconventional.
Yeah. And some people have their photographers, but they're starting a record cycle.
Yep.
So for people who don't know what that means, every time they put out a record, you kind of tour everywhere again.
Yeah. You got an 18 to 24 month record cycle. Right?
Yeah. So they're starting that. So I was I'll do this for a year, and that started in about November of last year.
Okay.
And everything I do is verbal. I have never signed contracts. It's gonna bite me in the ass one day, but that's just the relationship I have with.
Well, I definitely think that it's as long as there's that sort of implicit level of trust, and as long as as both parties are feel complicit in some capacity, it's if you decide to pull we don't have a contract.
Yeah.
Why would I want us to work with you?
Yeah. That's a good point.
Because then they'd be clearly, why would I trust you? You're pulling that card. That just sucks.
That does suck.
If
it ever comes to that, I'll call you up.
Right. The last thing I want to hit on was as a photographer, obviously you're limited to what you're photographing or what you're photographing with your subject. And I saw you casual mentions in regard to you doing shoots with Yale Wolf and we did something with Calvin Harris, or am I
Tiesto?
That's it, Tiesto.
Yeah.
So is it one of those things that you constantly want to start photographing people sort of outside of the quote unquote Warped Tour world and kind of growing past that, or is it that you're pretty comfortable with where you're at and you kind of want to jump around from that perspective?
Well, everything I shoot, I've always been I don't like being hired on as less than an artist.
Okay.
I don't know how to explain it, but think of the way that when people shoot with Terry Richardson, how they're not hiring Terry Richardson.
Right.
They're working with him.
Totally.
And I like that outlook on being a photographer for somebody is not being hired on and tossed away.
Right.
Because I feel like I don't get the images that I want when somebody thinks of me as less than them. I at least want to be your equal.
Right.
Like that's the most I want to be. I don't want them to think I'm more than them ever.
Right.
And I feel like, so the people, like when I worked with Tiesto or when I've worked with Yellow Wolf. Actually, Yellow Wolf was a cold hit up. That was one shoot that I didn't know anybody. I just hit him up.
Right.
But with Tiesto, like that's just a friend letting me shoot his current artist.
Sure.
Like it's never me hitting somebody up and begging for a shoot. It's always like me coming in and doing a shoot for a friend or a manager. Or,
someone you trust.
Yeah,
right,
somebody that I know. So it's kind of keeps me away from anything that's money oriented or I don't know. It's more real.
Yeah. No, that's true. I like the way that, you want to approach it, especially because like people, a lot of times, especially in the music industry, people do view photographers as just like, oh, this is guy I need to hire to get this thing.
Yeah, it's like scum.
It is.
Kinda. Like they don't think of you as, and that's why I just don't like that. I like people who, it's so much more fun to work with somebody when they respect you and like.
Yeah.
It wasn't until this year that I really realized that like between All Time Low and A Day to Remember, I talked to like the drummers of both bands and All Time Low's drummer was like, I was like, I'm trying to work with people on YouTube. I really like how they're doing their life.
Yeah.
I think it's so cool. Do you have any connections? And like, can you help me? He's like, of course.
Yeah.
You're like a good dude. I trust you.
Right.
And I was like, that's sick.
Right.
Whoa. He'll help me out.
Right.
He's like, Adam, all your friends will do this for you, right? Like you're a good dude. And I was like,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But
you hit on such an important topic that I think that's like the moment that you believe someone will do something for you, that I think that bond, friendship, business wise, like it is kind of manipulated. Where it's like you were saying, you were surprised when they decided to help you out. You know, because you were like, oh wow, like thanks. Like
I didn't expect that.
Right, yeah. But I think so many people do enter even their like business relationships or friendships where it's just like, oh, what can this person really like do for me? I mean, not saying that's like it's that callous when it first begins, but it's like,
I know, that's like LA.
Right.
It shouldn't be that. It should be, I like to figure like what I can do for them. Totally. That's kind of the more rewarding because when you do stuff for other people, I'm not saying I'm doing it to get return, but that's where the respect comes from. Right. And I'm down to be the first person to do something for somebody else. That's
sure.
Fun.
Meaning, that's where you create meaningful and trustworthy relationships, whether it be professional or otherwise. It is that core level of just like, oh yeah, like you're a talented person and like, yeah, this would be fun to work together. Yeah. As opposed to just like the other, like, oh wow, like I've got these ulterior motives for knowing you or whatever.
I can't even hang out. Like I can't even hang out in LA. Because I'm usually a very relaxed person. I do have I can get very anxious like anybody. Right. I don't know if I have anxiety problems like my parents believed. But right. And when I'm in LA, like when somebody's talking to me, like there's that saying, it's like in LA they say one thing mean another thing. In New York they just tell you what they mean. Right. Like, dude, just talk to me. Like, when somebody says one thing and means something else, I can't even focus on the conversation. Right. You're like, what are you saying? I'm like, I feel so like I'm not stupid. Right. Like, just treat.
Are you talking English?
I can't hang out there because of that sometimes. It's rough.
Yeah. I mean, everybody speaks to you because of your photography. Do you, do you have other sort of passions and interests outside of the context of just like creating a visual medium? I mean, I know people have asked you in regards to like, oh, would you ever do music videos and that sort of stuff? Like what other stuff do you get passionate about?
Yeah, I don't really know. Yeah. I shoot. I love shooting. Yep. Recently, I got like a drone copter. I love that. That's so fun. So I've been flying that around at shows. I really just do like follow what I have fun with. And I can tell when I'm stoked on something and I should dive into it more. Okay. And right now, I guess it's, photography. My main job, I'm always stoked on that. I always switch that up minimally to still do it, but I'm still stoked on it. The drone. I love the business aspect and the branding aspect of what I do. Sure. So everything kind of comes back to this. Right. I don't like also pro surf or anything. Right. Yeah. You know. Yeah. I'm into gaming. I do game with. I play a lot of Blizzard games like Hearthstone. Okay. Heroes of the Storm. Well, I don't know. I play like all these games there, but that's like I like play games and then do emails, and then like it's my break from work.
Sure.
So,
it's your decompression time.
Yeah.
Right,
so
right.
I do that daily, and it keeps me productive and on task.
Yeah.
I think.
That's odd. At least you tell yourself.
Yeah, I tell myself that.
Well, I really appreciate you coming up here and hanging out. This was very enjoyable for me.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. Oh,
enjoyable for me.
The audible handshake.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's Adam. Great conversation, right? If that doesn't inspire you to be like, oh man, I can create something, I can make something, I don't know what will. Visit 100wordspodcast.com. Again, fundraising campaign, visit patreon.com/xpurposex and contribute to the show. We greatly appreciate it. Visit our media partners, propertyofzach.com. Great friends, great content. Visit the site. You can email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. A lot of you have been reaching out recently, and I'm always glad to hear that sort of feedback and like, hey, check out my music, or hey, great job on this episode. I love that, especially episodes that have aired like months and months ago. They're like, oh, I just listened to that, and it's like, that's great. I love that. Next month, it's going to be a theme month because I just happen to have interviewed a lot of people who are what I define as, I don't want to throw around the word legendary because these are people who are still active in music, but these are people who I look up to and still continually look up to within the context of the punk and hardcore scene. So next month is, I'm going to dub this affectionately Old Guy Month. June will be a bunch of people who, honestly may be out of the quote unquote limelight, but they have so many amazing stories to share. And I mean, I could have probably talked to each of these guests for like hours and hours and hours. So these are the type of people that I'm talking about. I'm talking about Dave Rillian, the vocalist of Botch and currently of Narrows. I'm talking about Rob Moran from Unbroken. I'm talking about Justin Pearson from The Locust, and cool stuff coming up in June. So for those of you that are like, oh, hey, all this modern band stuff that you've been doing, like, just drop it. Okay, got it. This whole month is dedicated to you old fogies like me. So anyways, the producer for this show, Tom Richfield, and until next week, be safe, everybody.